So I guess we can just jump straight into the questions then.
I used to run workshops like this, and if you go to a workshop on engaging your math students, you're bound to get a whole lot of really cool little activities, relays and games and competitions and prizes and all this sort of stuff. And these are like the toolkit activities, right? So I'm a little bit tongue in cheek here, but if I'm a procedures first teacher, I'm aware that I'm not very good at engaging my students. So every now and then I'll do something that's fun and that will engage my kids. And so I'll pull out one of my toolkit engagement activities, and maybe it's a game, a relay, and that's their little 20 minutes of fun in a 2-week block. So that's how I tick off the engagement box in my head. But then we revert to normal maths teaching, which is basically do whatever I say, which is boring, right? But I do some engaging activities. Mind you, when I was at school in 12 years, I never remember any of those sorts of engagement activities. So there's nothing wrong with those. To quote Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with it. It's better to do some engagement activities than not. But that's what I would call external engagement. And it's dependent on the teacher ramping it up and doing their thing and having this fun activity, which is great. But what happened, what I'm interested in is what's the normal state of play. So if the normal state of engagement of students is not very engaged, but once a fortnight we do something that's fun, that's getting there, but it's missing the point. So authentic engagement is something that comes from within. And it's as simple as this. If students understand what they're doing and have a sense of control over what they're doing, they're going to be engaged. And that really is more of a setup thing than I'm the teacher, I'm going to ramp this up, we're going to do this relay, it's going to be crazy and blah, 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 which is a lot of fun to do. But you know what I mean? The intrinsic engagement is much more about the overall approach that I'm using. And look, humans love duality. Oh, so you're talking understanding, so you don't believe in procedures then. It's one or the other, It's you're either teaching procedurally or you're teaching for understanding. Or you're either teacher-centered or you're student-centered. Um, you're either engaging or you're not. And so in terms of this replication thing, when I say that's a trap, I'm not saying we're never going to have students replicate. I'm just saying if you're teaching, and this is a good question for teachers to ask themselves, how much of your lesson time for any particular class are your students replicating what you've explained? Now, if it's 80%, you're probably better than most. But if it's 80%, could we get it down to 70% and replace that with 10% of activities where students are exploring the concepts in a time efficient way that makes sense? So it's not one or the other. I'm not saying you chuck everything out that you think you know and do something different. It's just if we're shooting ourselves in the foot, if we're using activities that don't allow kids to understand as well as they could and don't foster agency, let's do something different so we can present maths in ways that do foster agency. So the intrinsic engagement simply comes from students understanding and having a sense of control over the activity. That's it.
That's
There's no
very,
bells and whistles. And you
yeah.
can still do some of your other crazy relay stuff because you'll have more time, because this way, I believe, and my experience is more time efficient. So that's the difference between typical normal engagement, which is very teacher driven and competition based and whatever, which is great.
Yeah.
But intrinsic engagement comes from within. And most students, like your compliance students, you can have a class that a lot of teachers think, oh, this is a great class. They do all the work, they get good results. Hang on. If they're just doing the work because they'd rather do the work than get into trouble, and they're not really into it, they'd rather be elsewhere, and they're not contributing to lessons, and they're just, chewing up whatever you say, and they do the practice. That's not what we're looking for. How does that help in the long term? So we want students who are intrinsically engaged, who understand, who are contributing, who are communicating their understanding to each other.
Mm.
Because then they understand how to learn, they enjoy learning, it flows on to other things,
Yeah.
you know, and they get a love of maths. Everyone wins.